Welcome to First Home Hustle. I'm Kim McCarty.
And I'm Dave Stahl.
And today we have a special guest with us. We have Courtney. And Courtney was a first-time home buyer this year. And so we thought it would be fun to bring in Courtney and kind of have her tell you guys the whole process and the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. So why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and tell everyone, about you and why you wanted to buy a house.
Awesome. So I am Courtney Bruce. I am almost a 30-year-old. I was like in a month, 2 months.
Okay.
And that was kind of the reason I wanted to buy a house. I felt like I had been living now in Dallas for 7 years. Moved from Kansas City. I'm in the interior design, furniture realm, architecture realm, and I had been doing the same thing for a very long time, in the same apartment for a very long time, and being an interior designer, I was like, I need to do something to a space that I live in.
Right.
I was organizing so much, and there's only so much in the apartment that you can do outside of organizing.
Right.
And so I was like, yeah,
it's time to buy a house.
Time to buy a house. I had recently got a promotion, and so that was like the exact time that I was like, well, now I can actually think about this and I can really like have the funds to be able to do it. So
awesome. Okay, so the very first thing is the most important part is Dave in the loan process. So why don't you just kind of explain how that process worked with Dave and how that felt for you?
Yeah, so I think it was, I got your name from Kim and Keith, and I was able to, I think we jumped on a call and able to kind of go through those first questions of who am I and work and expenses and all of the money things.
Was it painful to go through that part?
No, we did it in like 5 minutes at work. It was very easy.
Well, I asked that because there's a lot of people, like first-time buyers, who are like, oh my God, that's such
scared.
a daunting task.
Yeah.
It's like a weird thing to start thinking about all those things, I think, because it's like you're getting asked the questions of like taxes, basically, or when you start a new job. All the questions you get asked is at one moment, but I think at the same time, knowing that you're going into buying a house, it helps a little bit to know you're going to have to put your entire life out there. So
yeah.
Right.
Let's do it.
I get a lot of people who are like, I didn't know you were going to ask that. I'm so unprepared.
Right.
And it's, it's really just basic information about you.
Yeah.
And my joke with a lot of people is when I ask them what they make, if they don't know, it means they make too much and they start sending something.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you're
If you
making.
don't know,
If you don't know you're... Well, and I'm like a very financial, I like to keep track of everything. I have my budgets. I have 3 different notebooks that have all my budgets in them. So I think that was also a little bit helpful on my part to know exactly what you were asking and having all that information prior to.
Prepared.
I know.
Well, that doesn't happen very often.
Probably
So he was probably really excited about that.
I think we actually did it. He was like, hey, I was like, I'm about to jump on a call. And he's like, 5 minutes? I was like, sure. And we did it in 5 minutes.
Did it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If people know their situation, and it's not complex information, but there's a lot of people that like you ask them what they make and they literally do not know.
Yeah.
I think it's about.
I think it's about.
If I've got 5 minminutes, I'm gonna run with that number.
Yeah.
But you need to look at your paycheck later today.
And let me know what it actually
so that we
is.
know what it really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that part is funny with a lot of first time buyers. What did you do after you got the pre-approval letter? What was the next thing you did?
Oh, I think I immediately started looking at houses and then sending them to you.
Okay.
I was like, okay, what can I do? How much can I
that's right.
actually afford?
No, we did that, right?
I think we went and saw like 5 houses my first day, and I sent them all to you, and I said, what is the numbers? Give me my numbers.
Right. Because what I do, and I still do that to this, I've always done it. I always try to overestimate the numbers so that regardless of what you look at that's in that price point, you're still going to qualify.
Right.
And because she's like, well, what are the numbers really going to be? And I go, before you go look at places, send me all the addresses you're going to go look at.
Right.
And I'll run the numbers based upon what the taxes are so that now the only thing we're looking at that's estimated is insurance.
Yeah.
Right.
So now, before you go look and fall in love with something, you have an idea of where
What
you're
that
going to
payment
land.
looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that's an important, point to bring up is that I always say to people when they come and talk to me first and they haven't talked to a lender yet, I'm like, listen, it's important for you to know what it's going to cost you monthly to live in a house. You know, like, can you afford X, Y, and Z? You're telling me $350, but do you know what $350 looks like monthly, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you go buy a car. You can have a Mercedes, but can you afford the payment of a Mercedes? And so it's hard to make houses that are $350 look as good or look like a $250 and make those look the same. You can't do it.
Right.
So that's the one thing that I think is important for first-time home buyers, or any buyer actually, is to make sure that they know what those numbers look like before we go looking at houses.
Before you look at anything.
Yeah.
I mean, because you don't want to be out there looking at, you know, whatever website and go, boy, I love that house. It's $400. I think I can afford that.
I think I can.
And then you call a lender and the lender gives you the numbers and you go, whoa, let's pump the brakes here.
Yeah.
Because now you've got this thought in your head of what you thought you could afford, and it's beautiful. You love it. Now you got to step back and go, boy, I couldn't afford 4. I can afford 3, and 3 looks a lot different than 4.
It does.
So now I'm like, maybe I should wait.
Yeah.
Because what you did is you put a thought process in your head and set up a scenario that you couldn't achieve. So now you're like,
You're disappointed.
I'm disappointed. I can't do what I want to do. So I'm going to do nothing.
Yeah.
And I think too, you had, with my numbers, you were able to pre-approve me higher than even I was like originally thinking. So I think that also helped me, was my brain was set low in my world. And I know my brain was set very low compared to Dallas market prices, because Kansas is not the same as Dallas.
Right.
But I was able, I think, to work at it that way, knowing, okay, I'm pre-approved for this number. I know monthly, this is like the top notch I can hit. What's below it, and how can I get to that number below?
Right.
While also going up, because I was set so low in my mind.
So one thing that I try to do for every buyer, what have you looked at? Where do you think you're going to land? And most of the time they'll tell me 2 or 3 numbers, and I always pick the highest one.
Right.
To run the pre-approval, because at the end of the day, they saw something at that price point that they're like,
They're gonna
maybe
end
it's
up
that
there.
one. But then they come back and go, it's probably going to be lower than that. So I run it at the higher one, and I give them the numbers on the higher one. And if their ratios are low enough, I'll tell them, you know, if push comes to shove and you're in a battle to find something that you really like, you can afford a little bit more. I know that people budget, and they should. You know, what's affordable to me? What am I willing to pay?
Right.
But if it's just outside of that budget and that's where you need to be, part of my responsibility is to let you know that either you can, or this number that we're at, this is the top.
Yeah.
You can't go over it at all, or else you're not going to get approved.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that also brings up another great point, is that it's important that the lender and the realtor have a relationship where he can tell me, hey, she can't go a penny over this, or you've got some room. If you have to negotiate, you do have some room. So that's an important point as well.
Right.
Okay, so you get all approved, you have your approval letter, and we're going to start looking at houses. So it's all exciting, except, so kind of tell us how that went.
I had been looking online for like months.
Yeah.
I think like everyone typically does, you start looking at like a realtor.com or something.
Right.
And you see all these things and you're like, oh, I could do that. Well, I think when you actually start getting out there and looking, it's so much more draining. We were going like, I think it was like 3 days a week, 5 houses every day. It was a lot. I think I looked too many, but also the number I needed to get to, because we just kept looking and not finding things, or things that were looking amazing online that we were seeing in person had too many issues.
Right. Or weren't great locations once you get there, right?
Exactly. And I think that was one of my biggest things about buying a house. I am single. I live on my own with my dog.
Right.
But he can't support me. He's 7 pounds. So can't protect me at all. So safety was my biggest thing.
Yeah.
I think that there were a lot of houses that we looked at that if I were to be living with someone else, I would have definitely thought about it more.
Right.
But because I was by myself, I needed something in a better location. So every time we looked, I went back and looked at the safety map of Dallas and what are we looking at? Where, like, what's the crime around that area? So that kind of nixed some houses that I would have liked.
Right.
I think the other big thing of looking was once I saw the house, I drove the area again.
Mm-hmm.
Is there grocery stores around me, gas stations around me? I love Target. I needed it near me.
Right.
It was like the biggest thing. So I was kind of seeing the things I do on a day-to-day basis and places I go on a day-to-day basis. Are they even close to me? If they're not close to that house, I didn't really even want to. Yeah, I didn't want to be driving around town everywhere just to get things that I normally go to.
Right.
But yeah, we looked at a lot of houses. I actually found one I loved the first day.
Yes.
And it had been on the market for a really long time. So everyone was like, just wait, it'll be fine. And then a day later, someone put an offer in on it.
Right.
And I think that hit me a little bit harder because I then started comparing everything I saw to that house. And I think it was also a good part though, because we would walk in a house and I'd be like, mm-mm.
Yeah.
Like it's not even close to the same level as that one, and so I'm not even going there.
Right.
That's hilarious.
It was.
Yeah.
It
had been on the market for a while, and so, because you were a first-time buyer,
Yeah.
we felt like, okay, we'll let you sleep on it, basically.
Yeah.
And sleeping on it, lost it.
Yep.
Right?
I think it was literally the next day
Yeah.
I called and I was like, "Is this mean it's off the
On?
market?"
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
Yeah. But like we always say, everything always works out.
Yes.
It always works out. Okay, so we did go in as a backup though on that one. So if you are listening and you're like, gosh, I keep losing in multiple offers, it is important to actually take that chance and be a backup, because sometimes they do fall through, and that primary, that backup is now the primary contract. So if that had worked out, but we did put in a backup, and we kind of held on to that until we found.
And then we found the second one and put an offer in and did the inspection, and then that's when that one we backed out of, mainly because there was far more structural issues and HOA issues. Yeah, the HOA had fees that were not originally shown to us, and then they just kept piling on.
Yeah.
And it just was not to the point of where I started doing my numbers budgeting, and I'm like, no, I can't afford this anymore for how much the HOA fees
Well, that
were
one had a roof issue.
And it had a tarp on the roof.
Yeah.
And they said it was going to get replaced, but when? Who knew, right? And we couldn't close with the tarp on the roof, so we knew that wasn't going to work out.
And I think that conversation was interesting because I was so excited for it, and you guys called me to tell me that, and I was like, okay, let me think on it. And I was like, okay, I'll take that part. And then we got a little bit farther into it, and there was something else, and I was like, okay. And I think I could, in a way, hear that you guys were like, please back out of this one. Like, it's not here anymore.
I told you that.
You did at the end of it. You were like, I wouldn't have done that. Like, I would have backed out. And I think it took me finally being like, no. I think at the same time, it was, my brain started driving around that area. Like, I drove around that area, and I was like, do I love this area? And then that first issue happened, and I was like, okay, it's still something I need to be out of. Well, the biggest part too was I needed to be out of my apartment by April, and we were looking in January, so I had a very fast time frame. So I was like, I can work with it. And then something else happened, and I was talking to you, and you're like, I would back out. And I'm like, I don't think I can do this one. Like, it just doesn't.
It just kept piling on. The fees just kept piling on, and I think the fact that they had insurance policies that weren't covering the repairs that needed to be done, they were assessing the homeowners more.
Yeah.
It was all a bad scenario.
Right.
All right, so third time's a charm.
Third time was a charm. We went out and looked at a ton I think it was like 10 that morning, and I felt so bad. Some of them we didn't walk into. 10 was on the list. We walked up to some of them. We're like, no, and just got in the car and went to the next one. We're like, this isn't it. But yeah, like I think it was 8 to 10 that day, and it was the first one. It was the very first one we looked at. And it was like, okay, like there's potential. And me, I think seeing a house a little bit differently too was I am an interior designer. I can see something visually where a lot of people can't see like what you can do to it. And so I saw that one and I was like, okay. And then we went to the next couple ones and they were not wonderful. There was one that was okay, but it wasn't wonderful. And I was like, whatever. It's, another bummer day. And then I drove back around that. I drove in a different area just looking at other things. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back over there. And I drove around and I was like, I think I'm going to put an offer in on this one. And I called my parents because the whole process as well, was talking to my parents, kind of talking through that first one. My dad even said, don't put an offer in yet. You're fine. Everyone said it. And so this time, and I think that also kind of proved a point to myself that I didn't trust my gut the first time, and I should have just listened to what my instincts were telling me. So this one I was like, no, I think I like it. And both my parents were like, no, I don't really think so. And I sent the video and they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, I think I like this one. And at the end of the day, I texted you guys and I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to put an offer in. And I think maybe even you guys were surprised by it because it was just one that wasn't like hurrah, like this is amazing. And I didn't have that emotion immediately. But then when we went and viewed it a second time, I was like, you know, this has so much more potential than even the first one did. I can do so much more to it. I can get more out of it later on down the road. Like, it was in an extremely good area compared to the other one. So there was just all these positives that kept adding up. And I think that was, we put the offer in.
Well, and I love the location of it. The location's great. And we've been talking a lot on our podcast about the importance of first-time home buyers building wealth. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing by buying the property that you currently have, you get to hold that property as an investment if you want. When you decide you want to buy your second property, you rent out this first property. Mm-hmm. It is a great first rental property. So that's a great thing about what you purchased is you can hold this forever if you wanted to. Yeah. And rent it out and just make residual income on it.
And the best part about it too is that the changes, the updates that I think that it should have are not massive. They're not things that are going to cost me a ton of money. So I know the return is so much higher than what any of the other ones I looked at would have done.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so tell everybody your top thing that you think first-time home buyers need to know going into this process.
Slightly be ready for disappointment.
Okay.
I think that there's a lot more. It's exhausting. You go into it so excited, and it is exciting. It's crazy, like experience. You're about to buy something that is massive, right? And you own and all this stuff, and it's exciting. But I think a lot of people go into it and then immediately get disappointment and aren't ready for that. Okay. And so I think knowing that it's not going to go perfectly, like be prepared. Don't expect perfect. You like the first one, you get the first one, you're done. It's
well, and especially first-time home buyers with the price point that they're in, no matter what market we're really in, it's always going to be competitive. Yeah. Right? So there's always going to be that competition, especially where you were in the Dallas area. To get in that price point was really hard, was really difficult. All right, so tell everybody one thing that was your favorite thing about doing this.
It can't be the end.
It wasn't the end. It wasn't the end. I think honestly, my favorite thing was probably, this is weird, but I'm a numbers person. Probably going through the numbers with you every time. Okay. Mainly because I think, when you do have your budget or you do
That's
kind of know.
That's my favorite part too.
I'm glad. But it's like knowing what you truly, because I think it also sets you up for success later down the road within other houses. You know a little bit better what those numbers can look like. Right. And seeing the numbers and like seeing a house and then knowing that I can actually afford it is like an exciting thing.
So you're a rarity because most people do not like to discuss all the numbers.
I think we were on the phone all the time. I was like, hi, what's up? What's happening today?
Like, how much more stuff does he need?
I think a lot of people think that they want to talk about the numbers, but they don't. But when you start explaining the numbers, because most of it's on the phone for me, right? Right. I have this vision of people on the other end of the phone who aren't like plugged into the numbers. They're like eyes roll up in the back of their head and they're like, I have no idea what he just said. He said that if I don't understand to ask, but I'm not going to understand ever. So I explain all the numbers and then we're just done. So I come up with questions. Yeah. That they should have asked that they didn't ask in hopes that they understand what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But my favorite clients really are the ones who have all the questions. Right. If you have questions, I love it. Yeah. Because it means that you're plugged into what you're doing in the process. It's important.
I was writing every number down. I literally have the paper still on the back of your guys' first paper that you gave me. Yeah. Of just the process. Yeah. It has every house's numbers.
I could probably go back through text messages and see
probably. Yeah. Probably.
Okay, so yours was the numbers and just the oh my gosh, I can actually afford to do this. Yeah.
It makes it more real when you know that you can afford it. I think going through the process and looking at the houses is an amazing part. Right. And thinking of your future is an amazing part. But then at the same time, if you can't afford it, it doesn't mean anything. Right. And so I think realizing every single one we looked at was truthfully something I could afford. None
Right.
of them were like a crazy number I was gonna hopefully like work in my
Figure it
schedule.
out,
Yeah. So I think knowing the numbers was making it even more real for me.
Well, and I think it actually, although it was fun for you, that's probably the most important part of the whole process is knowing the numbers of whether or not you can afford it. You know, we'll find you a house in whatever budget you give us. We'll find you a house. It's finding, and for us, it was more of making sure you're in a great location because we knew, okay, you're single, plus you were a referral from a really good friend,
Yes.
and your parents were involved, and we wanted to make sure that we did all the right things.
Yeah.
But we still had a budget, and we had to make sure that we put you in those areas that got your budget and hit that mark for you.
Yeah.
All right. Dave, do you have any other questions that you can think of that we should ask her?
No, I mean, I think that knowing all the numbers going in, there's you get to the closing table and you expect it to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's
No surprises.
important. Well, right. There's no surprises. You don't get there and go, oh, it's this number?
Yeah.
Because you already absorbed that number because you knew what to expect. And there's a lot of people that, you know, just like I said, eyes roll up in the back of their head and they're just not present.
Right.
And then they get to closing and then they do have that sticker shock and sometimes buyer's remorse. I know even myself,
Right.
you know, I think it was like probably the fourth house I ever bought for like a year.
Didn't.
I knew that I could afford it and everything was great, but like for a year I was uncomfortable because it was more than the payment on my house before.
Right.
So, but it, you know, and I know the numbers.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of people that I think that they get to that finish line and they're uncomfortable because they didn't understand in the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's, you know, I think it's important that you have a good real estate agent who understands the part of where you need to be
Right.
and what you're looking for, and B, you have a good lender who explains all the stuff that you need to understand in a manner that you can absorb it
Understand
and get it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the other thing, random but not random, is making sure you actually shop around for your insurance, because a lot of people I think would just, my first thought was I was like, I have this one, I'm just going to go with that one. Got the numbers, shopped around with two people that you guys had both given me, and actually ended up switching everything, car insurance, like housing,
It just made more
everything.
sense. Yeah.
Because it's not always the cheapest one with what you have. It might be for renter's insurance,
Right.
but
Right.
it might not be for homeowner's insurance. And
Right.
Right.
they weren't giving apples to apples, and they also were being a lot more difficult with
Right.
what my original one. I was like, okay, well, this number's a little bit lower. Can you guys get me there? No. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, then I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's something to always, like, honestly, just to think about earlier in the process. I think I felt like I did it a little too late. Granted, we had a little bit of time because my inspection kept getting pushed, but so I had the time to actually figure out numbers and give them to you. But thinking about that earlier, because it can change it. I mean, like, a couple $1,000 difference
Yeah.
is a lot
It does.
when you're buying a house.
Yeah. It adds up. Yeah.
So
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to share? Anything that you thought this was great, or hey, I wish that we had done it differently? Anything? No?
that was awesome.
Okay. Awesome.
Happy and in the house, and
I need to come over and take a look at all the updates.
I know.
Have you
About
done the
pictures.
updates?
I've done a lot. Well, I think I've done a lot, but I've done a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've done, and that was the thing. All of them that I have done, I only had help on one.
Okay.
Popcorn ceiling. I couldn't do that on my own.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You
Gotta
know-
get all of it's gone. It's the best thing I ever. Best money I spent was having someone take popcorn ceiling off of my ceilings.
Oh yeah.
That's not
It
an
was
easy job.
everywhere. No, they also painted 5 times over it, so it was like
Wow.
Bad.
It was
Yeah, I would've-
up there.
it was glued on.
It was on.
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming in. It was awesome to have you here. And if you guys have any questions about first-time home buying, and remember, we can help you anywhere in the U.S., just let us know. Thanks so much.